Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Socrates. Today we are diving back into the work of Plato, and before we get into Book 2 of the Republic, which is where we are at, we're going to acknowledge Mr. David Haran again because this is a new book and it's a new writing, and so I want to direct as much traffic back as possible for y'all to give him some support and some love for his free translation that he devoted years of his lives to. By going back and showing love, either financially or just by visiting the channel, you help him to know that he is appreciated for the work that he has done, and we always try to give appreciation back. The link is in the description box down below. And so we are going to go into this free works. We are in Republic, and we are going to go to Book 2 because we finished up Book 1 in one sitting. And so Plato's Republic Book 2 picks up exactly where Book 1 left off. And so let's get into the text. Now, having said all this, I thought I was quit of the argument, but it turned out in the end to be a mere prelude. For Glaucon, who is always extremely forthright on every issue, on this occasion in particular could not accept the withdrawal of Thrasymachus. So he said, Socrates, do you wish to seem to have persuaded us, or do you wish to persuade us truly, that it is better in every way to be just rather than unjust? To persuade you truly, said I, that is what I would choose if it were up to me. Well then, he said, you are not doing what you wish to do. Yes, tell me this. Do you think there is a kind of good that we would choose to have, not with a view of getting something out of it, but because we welcome it for its own sake, like enjoyment and pleasures that are harmless and produce no future consequences apart from enjoying their possession? Well, said I think there is a good of this kind. What about the kind we prize both for its own sake and for what it gives rise to? Thinking, for instance, and seeing or being healthy, since we welcome these presumably for both reasons. Yes, said I. And do you see a third form of good, which includes physical exercise, being healed when you are ill, healing others, and money making in general? These we would say are troublesome, and although they benefit us, we would not choose to have them for their own sake, but for their rewards, and for whatever else they give rise to. Yes, indeed, said I, there's a third form, but what about it? In which of these three do you place justice? Now, physical, a kind of good that we would choose to have, not with getting something out of it, but for its own sake. I don't see this as three options, though. That it's better in every way to be just than unjust, and he's trying to persuade them of that. Is there a kind of good that we would choose to have, not with a view of getting something out of it, but because we welcome it for its own sake, like enjoyment, and pleasures that are harmless and produce no future consequences apart from enjoying their possession? Well, that would definitely not be a justice situation. And the kind we prize both for its own sake and what it gives rise to. For instance, seeing or being healthy. Now that is a natural state, and therefore justice does not exist, because in natural state, it is you alone who is affected by your alone consequences. Whenever you get into a societal state, it is by necessity, not the natural state. Now, you can say that the natural state is to live communally, and there's an argument to be made that living communally is humanity and most of nature's way of dealing with life. But the very foundational soul level issue is that it is your journey, right? And the The decisions to act right or just on the behalf of others is a situation that comes up after it is your journey. Now, where you go on your journey depends on whether the decisions you make are just. In large part, that is true. So be careful, like that. This is not. This is like the three into one, right? There is the one that is just the pure sensation of the thing, and that of course is not justice. And then there is the state of being that is, which is the soul, which is also not justice. And then there is the doing, which is the third part, or the spirit, and that is where justice would reside. Because in the doing, there can only be justice through doing. If there is an injustice, it can only be righted through doing. And if there is justice to be done, it can only be done by doing. I think I said that correctly. Like that is my reasoning on this matter. Prior to getting into this too deep, right? So, and the third form, which is physical exercise and being healed, which is the doing, right? That is how I break down those three categories, and that is where I would place justice and the reason why I would put it there. We will get into what justice actually is. I don't remember if we did last week or not, but we will get into that at some point. And there's a third form, but what about it? And which of these three do you place justice? I think that it belongs in the noblest of the three, the one that should be prized for itself and for what it gives rise to by anyone who is blessed. And I agree, that would be the third category. Well, most people do not think so. They think it belongs in the troublesome form that should be practiced for the sake of its rewards, and for reputation based on appearance. And by just itself, it should be avoided because it is difficult. And that is a deflection. That's not actually the argument. That's taking a piece of the argument out. That is taking it is specifying parts of the doing and calling it the doing. Right? Because yes, the doing this, practicing it for the sake of rewards is part of the doing, but without the doing, that is not there. That is not part of the being. It is not even part of the sensations. It is part of the doing. And the reputation also comes from the doing. So it is a byproduct of the doing, but in the doing is where justice would reside. I know that is how they think, I said. And Thrasymachus has been criticizing justice for some time for being like this, and he has been praising injustice. But it seems I am a slow learner. And by the way, if I take my glasses off and I start talking to y'all like this, that is me talking. And if I have my glasses on, it is me reading. For the most part, that is how I'm trying to do this. So I don't have to specify me every time. If you see me shaking my glasses at you, that's what that is. Oh, but it seems I am a slow learner. Well, come on then, said he, and see if you still hold the same view after you listen to me. For Thrasymachus seems to me like a snake who has submitted to your charms, more meekly than he should, since, to my mind, no proof on either side has yet been given. For I am eager to hear what each is, and what each possesses, just by itself when present in the soul, and to set to one side their rewards, and whatever arises from them. So, I shall proceed in this way, indeed, if it seems acceptable to you. I shall revive Thrasymachus' argument, and I shall say first the sort of thing they maintain justice is, and where it has come from. Secondly, I shall show that everyone who practices it does so against their own free will, as a necessity, and not as something good. And thirdly, I shall demonstrate that they are acting reasonably in doing so, because the life of the unjust is actually far better than the life of the just, according to them. Although this is not how it seems at all to me, Socrates, I am perplexed, nevertheless, from hearing Thrasymachus and countless others assailing my ears, while the argument on behalf of justice, that it is better than injustice, I have heard so far from no one. In the way I wish to hear it, I wish to hear justice itself being praised for itself. And I think I am most likely to get this from you. And this is why I shall speak forcibly in praise of the unjust life. And in speaking like this, I shall demonstrate to you the manner in which I want to hear you, in turn, censuring injustice and praising justice. So, let us see if what I am proposing is to your liking. More than anything, said I, yes, that could be more delightful to a person of intelligence than hearing about this issue and discussing it again and again. Sorry. You put that perfectly, said he. Now, listen to the first thing I said I was going to say on this matter. The sort of thing justice is and where it has come from. Indeed, according to them, doing injustice is good by nature, while suffering injustice is bad. And the badness in suffering injustice exceeds the good in doing so. And in so, when people are being unjust to one another, and suffering injustice too, and getting a taste of both the doing and the suffering, those who are unable to avoid the one and opt for the other think it is profitable to enter a contract with one another, neither to do injustice nor to suffer it. From there, they begin to set down laws, mutual contracts, and to call whatever the law commands lawful and just. Thus, this, they say, is the origin and the very essence of justice, and that is indeed how it is structured, right? This is the very essence of how society itself is structured, and by interaction with someone, you take yourself out of the second and into the third, which is the doing. By interacting with anyone, you are doing something, whether it is conversing, whether it is doing more than conversing. Whatever it happens to be that you are doing with someone, you together are doing it. You are together creating the reality that you are sharing at this particular moment. And that is where justice is existing. That is the very essence of where justice can exist. And so, by the two of you coming together and creating this thing, it in turn grows by exponents whenever you add more people to it. So if you've got 3 people, then that is the 3 of you combining into a singular thing. And that is the basis by which we get laws. That is the basis by which we have contractually obligated ourselves and our parents have obligated us, right? So our republic, which we have here, is based upon the societal constructs that we agree to as our forebears, right? Not us now, but as our forebears. But as citizens, we take up the mantle of the societal constructs. And some of those we agree upon and some of them we don't, which is why we have 50 independent states in our republic instead of just one unified country with a codified set of laws. So that we can have the lubrication of movement of people to where they want to be. We seem to think that wherever we are has to conform to us instead of making sure that where we are is where we want to be. That is the foundation of our societal constructs. I hear a lot of people complain about taxes, right? And I have a somewhat controversial stance on taxes. Y'all want to hear it? My controversial stance on taxes is that it is a privilege to be able to pay a tax. To be able to pay somebody else to do the thing that you don't want to do in every single circumstance is a privilege. And no matter how much you think that you can do it better, you don't want to build a road. You don't. It is a pain in the ass. I have done it. I did construction testing, and I tested the stuff that they made roads. I laid concrete and did the things making roads. It sucks. It's a great job. It's a very noble job. It's one of the professions that we should pay better because we literally have lives riding upon it. But that's a whole different soapbox. But you personally don't want to do that. You personally don't want to have to make sure that your neighbor does that for their section of the road. And that's a whole thing, right? I get into that because private roads don't work. They will fall into disrepair more often than not. Or they don't see heavy traffic, right? Oh, that's great. Your road doesn't see heavy traffic. But maybe the shop down the road needs the heavy traffic. And so they need a road that can support that. Are you going to pay for their road to support that heavy traffic? Are you going to pay for the upkeep of the road for the neighbor who doesn't do his duty and care for that? No. We designate our taxes to do roads. Now, we don't hold our representatives responsible for what they do with our stuff. So we have a breakdown in justice there. There is a not doing that leads to injustice there. We are not doing our responsibility to our republic to ensure that the people who spend our money spends the money as we tell them to. We have the same problem in education. We have the same problem in a whole multitude of places because of not doing. Because of not doing. And they say the origin of the very essence of justice. It is the middle ground between what is best. And the reason I got off onto the taxes thing is because your taxes are doing what you're not doing, right? It is a privilege to pay taxes for someone else to do a thing that you don't want to do. Whether that is putting the electricity on in your house, making sure that you have clean, fresh water, or making sure that you have a road to drive upon. It is us who are responsible for the doing of making sure that that is done responsibly. And that is the very essence of justice. That is the whole point of our societal contracts. We are agreeing as a society to pay taxes so that they will be spent for us here in the manner that is beneficial for us here. That's why I'm a hard no on all the overseas spending, all of it. It is a middle ground between what is best and not paying a penalty when you act unjustly, and what is worst, being unable to get revenge when you suffer injustice, and what is just, being midway between both extremes, is prized not as something good, but as something that is respected due to an inability to do injustice, since a true man who can actually do this would never enter into a contract with anyone neither to do injustice nor to suffer injustice. That would be madness. So, Socrates, according to their argument, such is the nature of justice. This is what it is like, and such are its natural origins. Now we would be most likely to see that those who practice justice do so against their will because they lack the power to act unjustly. If we were to picture in mind a situation somewhat as follows, let us grant each of these two, the just and the unjust person, license to do whatever they want. And then we shall accompany them and watch where their desire may lead them in each case. We would then catch the just person in the very act doing the same thing as the unjust person, getting more. This is what every nature naturally pursues as something good, despite being forcibly misled by law into respecting equality. The sort of license I am referring to would be most apparent if they were to possess the power that they say once belonged to the ancestor of Gyges of Lydia. Well, he was a shepherd working for the then ruler of Lydia, and when there was a huge storm and an earthquake, the ground broke apart and a chasm appeared in the very place he was tending the flocks. And when he saw it, he was amazed and went down into it. And the story goes, he beheld other amazing sights, including a hollow bronze horse which had little doors. And when he went down and peeped in, he saw that there was a corpse inside that appeared to be larger than a human. and the corpse was wearing nothing else apart from a gold ring on its finger. He removed the ring and went out again. And when the usual meeting of shepherds was held to report to the king on a monthly basis on the state of his flocks, he arrived wearing the ring. And he sat down with the others, and he happened to turn the ring around towards himself to the inside of his hand. And with that he became invisible to the people he was sitting with, and they spoke about him as if he was not there. He was amazed, and he fiddled with the ring again and turned the ring outwards, and he immediately became visible once more. And once he had noticed this, he tested the ring out to see if it really had this power, and he found that it was so. And on turning the ring inwards, he became invisible, and on turning it outwards, he became visible. This is interesting, right? This is an interesting insertion into here, because this shepherd, Gyges of Lydia, there was an earthquake and a huge storm, and the ground broke apart, and a chasm appeared, and he went down into it, and he found a hollow bronze horse. Now, there's a whole lot of ways that could go, but had little doors. Now, I'm not a timeline guy, right? So y'all let me know in the comments down below, and I'm going to look it up later, more than likely if I remember. Was this before or after the Trojan horse? Because that would be interesting. If this was tied into the story of the Trojan horse, would be an interesting rabbit hole to look at. But this ring, that's interesting too. Now, I don't know if you know it or not, but I have a conspiratorial mind. I do. I love it. I don't believe every conspiracy, but I know most of them, right? And the Ring of Power is the obvious, Lord of the Rings reference, but there are other places that it's at. And this is an interesting reference to a ring that makes you invisible. It's just interesting, and I didn't know that this was buried in here. And so I'm not familiar at all with this lore, and it's interesting to me. But having become aware of this, he immediately contrived to become one of the messengers that go to the king. And when he got there, he seduced the king's wife, and with her assistance he set upon the king, killed him, and took over the kingship. Now, if there were two rings like this, so this is the point of the story right here, and one was worn by our just person, and another by our unjust person, there is no one, it would seem, with such adamantine resolve as to abide by justice, and dare to refrain from touching other people's possessions when it is possible for him, with no fear, to take whatever he wants from the market and go into private houses and lie with whomever he wants, to kill anyone or free anyone he wants from prison, and to behave generally among his fellow men as though he were equal of a god. But behaving in this manner, he would not be doing anything different from the other fellow. They would be going down the same path. Okay, so now that is a straw man argument, right? That is setting up the weak man. How do you know that there is nobody that wouldn't? Maybe there is. I would like to think I would be. If I had the power to be invisible, I would like to think that I would use it in the efforts of justice and not injustice. Now, I have myself, I can't say evidence because it's not something I can pull out in front of you, though. It is definitely like anecdotal stories from my life where I have absolutely resisted the temptation, where I could have absolutely been rolling in dope, bro. Like, you may not know, like, you may just find me through the PittCast, and it's a whole different situation here, but I was a little bit of a rough fellow when I was younger. I did rough things when I was a teenager, and then I joined the Navy, and I got out and I did some more rough things for a very short time after I got out. But like I was involved in things that people just aren't involved in real life, right? And that's not a brag. That's just to give a basis that I know what I'm talking about. And I have had the temptation where I could have done things and nobody would know. And I could have done things and been on top of the world. Like, that was a very real temptation that was presented to me. And I know how I chose. So when I say that maybe I would make the proper choice with that kind of a power, that is the basis upon which I'm putting that. That's not to say that I've never made bad choices, but I learned from them and going forward made better choices. Right? That is kind of the point of the spiral. And so that is a real possibility at a minimum. Maybe it's not me, maybe it's someone else. Maybe there was no single person alive in all of the area who could do it. But I find that hard to believe. Surely there was one ethical man. If there was one, then the entire argument is just straw manning. So, someone might say that this is strong evidence that no one of his own free will is just, but only when he is compelled to be. Because being just is not something that is good for him personally, and since whenever a person believes he will be able to act unjustly, he will do so. For every man believes that injustice is far more profitable, personally, than justice. And see, that is straw manning. And what they believe is true is anyone who puts forward an argument of this sort will maintain, because if someone who has obtained such license as this never had any desire to act unjustly, nor to lay hands on other people's possessions, he would be regarded as wretched and devoid of intelligence by those who noticed, although they would still praise him when face to face with one another, deceiving one another completely because of their fear of suffering injustice. Well then, well then, so much for that. As for this decision, the life of the people we are speaking of, we shall be able to decide the issue correctly once we contrast the most just person with the most unjust, but not otherwise. So what contrast do I mean? It as follows. Let us not take nothing away from the injustice of the unjust man, nor from the justice of the just man. No, let us propose that each of them is perfect in terms of his own conduct. So, in the first place, let the unjust man act like expert craftsman, such as a foremost steersman or physician, who is fully aware of the impossibilities and the possibilities associated with his skill, and who attempts what is possible and sets aside what is impossible. And even if he slips up somewhere, he is up to the task of setting it aright. So we should allow the unjust man attempting his unjust acts in the correct manner to go undetected if he is going to be utterly unjust. And we should regard the fellow who gets caught as inept. For the pinnacle of injustice is to seem just, even though one is not. So, let us grant complete injustice to the completely unjust person. And there should be no omissions, but we should allow him, while perpetrating the greatest injustices, to have provided himself with the greatest reputation for justice. And even if he does slip up somewhere, let us grant him the ability to set it right, to speak persuasively enough that if any of his unjust actions are ever exposed, and to use force to whatever extent force is needed, because he has the courage and strength to do so, and because he is well supplied with friends and property. And having put an unjust person of this sort in place, we should set the just person alongside him in our account, a simple, noble man who, as Astyalicus says, wishes to be good and not just to seem to. So we must take away this seeming, for if he is going to seem just, he will have honors and privileges because he seems to be this sort of person. Accordingly, it will not be clear whether he is the sort of person he is for the sake of justice or for the sake of privileges and honors. So we should just strip away everything else apart from justice and make his situation the exact opposite of the previous fellow. For although he is doing nothing unjust, let him have an enormous reputation for injustice, so that he may be well tested in terms of justice by resisting any softening in the face of a bad reputation and whatever results from that. But let him persist unto death, undeflected in his course, reputed to be the most unjust, even though he is just, so that both men, having attained the pinnacle of justice, in one case of it and of an injustice in the other, may be judged as to which of the two is happier. My dear Glaucon, said I, how thoroughly you clean up both men for judgment, as though they were two statues. I am doing my best, Sensei, since they are both like this, I will no longer be hard in my view to complete our account of the sort of life that is in store for each of them. So, this should be described, Socrates, and in this case, it is described in very crude terms. Do not presume that I am the one who is saying this. No, it is the people who praise injustice above justice. These people will say that the man in this situation will be whipped and stretched on the rack and put in chains and have his eyes burned out. And finally, having suffered all possible evils, he will be impaled and will come to realize that one should not wish to be just, but to seem to be so. And the saying of Asilaicus turns out to be much more applicable to the unjust man. For they maintain that, in fact, the unjust man, since he is engaging in something that adheres to truth and does not live his life according to mere seeming, does not wish to seem unjust, but to be so. It's interesting to see the consequences here. For doing the right thing. Like, that is what the natural consequence of doing the right thing, regardless of being sought, will bring. It is the natural consequence of doing the right thing and not having credit for it that you would be considered evil, because if you're not getting the credit for doing the right thing, it's the natural result. Enjoying the fruits of the deep furrow of thought, from which sagacious counsel is sprung. Firstly, he rules in the city because he seems to be just. Then he marries a wife from any family he wants and gives his children in marriage to whomever he wants. Does business with anyone he wishes and is well benefited by all of this. He also gains by having no scruples about doing injustice. So, in competitive situations, in private or in public, they say he wins out and gets more than his enemies and is wealthy because he gets more. And so, he does good to his friends and harm to his enemies. And he makes sufficient sacrifices and offerings to the gods magnificently, and serves the gods and the people he wants to far better than the just man. And as a result, they say it is more appropriate, in all probability, that he is more beloved of the gods than the just man. On this basis, Socrates, they say that from the gods, and from this fellow man too, the life provided to the unjust person is better than what is provided to the just. And when Glaucon had said this, I had in mind to say something in response, but his brother, Adeimantus, said, You surely do not imagine, Socrates, that enough has been now been said about this argument. But why not? The very point, said he, that most needed to be made has not been made. In that case, said I, the saying goes, let a brother be there for a brother. Help a brother out. And so you should come to his aid if this man has left anything out. And yet, for my part, what he has said already is enough to floor me, and render me incapable of coming to the assistance of justice. You are talking nonsense, said he, and yet you should also listen to this. Yes, it is necessary that we also go through the opposite arguments to the ones he recounted, arguments that praise justice and censure injustice, so that the point I think Glaucon wishes to make may be clarified. Fathers, when speaking to their sons and offering them advice, and anyone who cares for anyone, speak to them presumably about the need to be just, by praising not justice itself, but the good reputation derived from it, saying that by seeming to be just from the reputation alone, they may be secure positions of authority in marriages and whatever else Glaucon listed just now, all from having a reputation for being just. Yet, these people have more to say on the subject of reputation, for when they throw in good reputation in the eyes of the gods, they describe a whole host of goods that they declare are given by the gods to holy people, just as noble as Hesiod and Homer too, declare in one case that for the just people, the gods make oak trees. For the just people, the gods make oak trees. Now, there's a whole rabbit hole that we could go down that we're not going to go down about the different woods and the different personalities of the woods. And oak is a noble wood. We'll just leave it at that. But while it is a fruitful tree, there is a lot of work that goes into making beneficial use out of most of the fruit of that tree. The acorns you can make flour from. You can eat that in a situation. Most of them are so tannin rich that it is very unpleasant to try to do without knowledge of how to prepare it. To the point that it can make you quite sick if you do not prepare it well. So don't take my culinary advice on how to do it. They bear acorns in their topmost branches with swarms of bees below. Okay? Their woolly sheep are weighed down with fleeces. The oak trees? That's weird. For just people, the gods make oak trees, but the best acorns in their topmost branches and swarms of bees below. And their woolly sheep are weighed down with fleeces. Well, maybe the sheep are eating the acorns, and the acorns are making good wool. Okay, that's a good logical conclusion to that. There are a lot of really good reasons why eating acorns would actually benefit wool. So, okay. But what does that have to do with justice? It has nothing to do with justice, and it has everything to do with a tree. Well, that has to do with stewardship to a certain degree, right? If you have the sheep eating there and they're spreading nutrients in the area, that's going to fertilize the tree, and that's going to make better fruit. And it is a cycle that repeats, and it's going to bear fruit for everybody. But that has nothing to do with justice. That's not even really part of the doing. That's part of the being, because the sheep are they're part of a unit, but that unit is, it's not like a cohesive unit, right? It's safety in numbers, and that's more of a self-orientation than it is a tribe orientation, even though it is very much a communal thing. So there's no justice associated with having good trees. You can be unjust and nurture your trees. That is self-serving. That's not a good argument. That's all. That's what I'm saying. And there are many other good things connected to these. In the other case, Homer says something similar. As of some king, as a blameless man and God-fearing, and ruling as Lord over many powerful people, upholds the way of good government, and the black earth yields him barley and wheat. His trees are heavy with fruit, and his sheep flocks continue to bear young. The sea gives him fish. But the goods from the god that Musaeus and his son bestow upon the people are more novel than these. In their account, they lead them into Hades, and having set them reclining at a symposium of holy people, which they have prepared, they crown them with garlands, and make them spend their time thereafter in a drunken state, in the belief that the supreme reward for excellence is eternal drunkenness. Others extend the rewards from the gods even further than this, for they maintain that holy people who are faithful to their oaths leave behind them a whole race, children and children's children. I have a whole Bible study y'all might want to check out. And so, in these respects and in others like these, they sing the praises of justice, while they sink the unholy and unjust people into some mire in Hades, compel them to carry water in a sieve, and while they are still alive, they bring them into evil repute, and they ascribe to these unjust people all the punishments that Glaucon listed for those who are just, but have a reputation for being unjust. But they have nothing else to say. Such then is the praise and the censure associated with each, and with the just and the unjust. But as well as these, Socrates, consider also the kinds of arguments about justice and injustice spoken by ordinary folk and by poets. For they all, with one voice, keep saying that justice and sound-mindedness are something glorious but difficult and hard work to attain, while restraint and injustice are pleasant and easy to attain. But only by opinion and convention are they a disgrace. For they, with one voice, keep saying that justice and sound-mindedness are something glorious but difficult and hard work to attain, while lack of restraint and injustice are pleasant and easy to attain. And only by opinion and convention are they a disgrace. I just wanted to chew on that for a second. Like, we're going to get into some more here, but they say that the unjust actions are, for the most part, more profitable than just ones, and they regard bad people who are wealthy and generally more powerful as happy, and they have no scruples about honoring them in public and in private, while disrespecting and looking down on those who are in some way weak and poor, even whilst agreeing that these are better people than the others. But the most surprising in all of these things is what they say about the gods and about excellence. They say that the gods themselves allot misfortunes and a bad life to a good many people, and an opposite fate to people of the opposite sort. And begging priests and soothsayers going to the doors of the wealthy man convince him that they have a power, provided by the gods through sacrifices and incantations, to make good any injustice committed by him or his ancestors with pleasant festivities. And if he wants to bring ruin upon some enemy with minimal expenditure upon his part, he may do harm to just and unjust alike with certain incantations and spells, which they proclaim persuade the gods to serve them. And they bring forth poets as supporting witnesses to all these arguments, some making the case that badness is easy because badness is abundant and easy to lay hold of. The road is smooth and it dwells very close at hand. But gods have placed sweat in front of the path of excellence. Yeah, that is true. And a road that is long and rough and steep. Others bring in Homer as their witness that the gods are turned by humans because he too said. Even the gods themselves are moved by prayer, by sacrifices and soothing vows, libations, and burnt offerings. Humanity turns the will of the gods, praying whenever someone has transgressed or gone astray. And they produce a confused array of books by Musaeus and Orpheus and the offspring of the moon and of the muses, they say, on the basis of which they perform their sacrificial rites, convincing not only private citizens but whole cities that there are remissions and purifications of their unjust deeds available, although through sacrifices and playful pleasantries. And so those who are still alive and also those who have died, they call initiations, which deliver us from the evils of the other world, where horrors await to those who have not performed the sacrifices. And again, I have a whole Bible study you should probably check out. Dear Socrates, said he, when all this is being said about excellence and badness and the esteem in which they are held by gods and humans, and when it is said so often in these various ways, what do we think this will do to the souls of the young and when they hear it? Young people who are gifted and up to the task as if it were flitting between all the various formulations and working out from them the sort of person one should be, and how one should behave in order to lead the best life possible. Indeed, he would be most likely to ask himself after the manner of Pindar, shall I, by justice or by crooked deceit, ascend the high wall and, thus fortified, live out the rest of my life? For according to what is being said, there is no advantage to me in being just. And if I actually seem unjust, only trouble and losses that are plain to be seen. But if I am unjust and have secured a reputation for justice, a divinely sweet life is promised. Therefore, since the wise man explained to me that seeming overpowers the truth and is Lord of happiness, to this indeed should I turn fully. I must sketch about myself a shadowy picture of excellence as an exterior facade, while training the cunning, subtle fox of the all-wise Auriculaus behind me. But surely someone will declare it is not easy to be bad and go undetected always. Indeed, we shall say nothing else that is worthwhile is an easy matter either. Nevertheless, if we are going to enjoy happiness, this is the path we must follow, since that is the way the footprints of these arguments are leading us. So, we shall form companies and associations in order to avoid being detected, and there are teachers of persuasion who, for a fee, impart the wisdom needed for public speaking and for winning lawsuits. Based on these, we shall use persuasion in some cases and force in other cases, so that we may continue to get more with impunity. But of course, someone might say, you do not go undetected by the gods, nor can you use force against them. But what if there are no gods, or human affairs do not concern them at all? Why should we, for our part, care about not getting detected? If, on the other hand, there are gods and they do care about us, we know about them and have heard about them from no other sources than the laws and the genealogies of the poets. The very sources who are saying they are amenable to being turned and persuaded by sacrifices, soothing vows, and offerings. We must believe both or neither. Now, if they are to be believed, then we should act unjustly and offer sacrifice from the fruits of our unjust acts. For by being just, we shall merely go unpunished by the gods, but we shall forego the advantages born of injustice. However, by being unjust, we shall have the advantages, and by praying when we transgress or fall into error, we shall win them over and escape unpunished. But surely someone may say, we shall pay a penalty in Hades for whatever injustices we may have done here, either ourselves or our children's children. But my friend, he will reply on reflection, the initiations for their part are extremely powerful, and so are the gods of deliverance. So, say the greatest cities and the children of the gods who have become the gods' poets and prophets, and who reveal that this is indeed the case. Now, by what argument might we still choose injustice in preference to gross injustice, which we may attain along with a fraudulent seemliness, and act as if we are minded to act as gods with the humans in life after death, as the argument of most people, and of the special folk proclaims. The special folk. Indeed, from all that has been said, is there any way, Socrates, that anyone possessed of any actual intellectual, physical, financial, or family power would be willing to revere justice and not laugh when he hears it being praised? And so, if someone is able to demonstrate that what we have said is false and has recognized well enough that justice is best, he has a lot of sympathy with those who are unjust and is not angry with them. He knows, rather, that apart from someone who cannot bear to act unjustly because of a divine nature, or who refrains from it because of the knowledge he has acquired, no one else is just of their free will. Rather, they censure unjust action out of cowardice, old age, or some other weakness because they are powerless to enact it. This must be obvious because the first such person who attains power to do so is the first person to act unjustly, as much as he possibly can. And there is no other cause of all this except the origin of this entire argument, directed by Glaucon and myself towards you, Socrates, to make the case that, come on, my wonderful man, of all of you who claim to be champions of justice, beginning with the earliest heroes, whose utterances are still with us, right down to human beings today, no one so far has censured injustice or praised justice on any other basis than reputation, esteem, and the advantages that derive from it. And no one, so far, either in poetry or in ordinary language, has described in sufficiently detailed argument what each does, itself, by its own power, when present in the soul of its possessors, unnoticed by the gods and humans, an argument according to which injustice is the worst of all the evils that any soul can have within itself, while justice is the greatest good. For if you had all described it from these terms from the beginning, and convinced us of this from our earliest years, we would not have been acting as one another's guardians for fear we might behave unjustly, but each of us would himself be his own guardian, by fear that by acting unjustly he would have to live the worst evil of all. Okay, I'm going to try to get through to about right here, I think. So, now, wait. So Socrates, and perhaps even more than this, is what Thrasymachus and anyone else, I suppose, might say about justice and injustice, by crudely misrepresenting, in my opinion, at any rate, the power that they possess. But and I need to hide nothing from you, I am speaking forcefully as I possibly can, because I am here to hear you expressing the opposite views. Do not just show us by your argument that justice is stronger than injustice, but show what each of them, just by itself, is doing to their possessor, such that one is bad and the other good. And take away the reputations that go with them, as Glaucon has directed you, for Unless you take away the true reputations from each and substitute the false ones, we shall say that you are not praising what is just, but what is reputed to be just. Nor are you censoring what is unjust, but what is reputed to be. And you are encouraging us to be unjust without being noticed. And you are agreeing with Thrasymachus that what is just is someone else's good, since it is the advantage of the stronger, while what is unjust is to one's own advantage, and what is profitable, but is disadvantageous to the weaker. Sorry, I got this thing in my throat. Now, since you have agreed that justice is among the greatest goods, those that are worth acquiring for the sake of all that comes from them, but much more so for themselves, goods like sight and hearing, intelligence, and indeed health, and whatever other goods are fruitful by their own nature and not merely by opinion. You should therefore praise this particular aspect of justice, which in its own right benefits its possessor, while injustice does harm. Leave the rewards and reputations for others to praise, because although I might put up with other people when they are praising justice and censoring injustice in this way, by extolling or bewailing their associated reputations and rewards, I will not accept it from you unless you order me to do so, because you have spent your whole life considering this issue and nothing else. So do not show us by our argument alone that justice is stronger than injustice, but show what each of them, just by itself, is doing to their possessor, whether gods or humans notice this or not, such that one is good and the other bad. Now, although I had always admired the natural qualities of Glaucon and Adeimantus, nevertheless, when I heard them on this occasion, I was utterly delighted. And I said, "You are worthy sons of your own father." And that admirer of Glaucon's began his eulogy of you quite nicely, after you had distinguished yourselves at the battle of Megara, when he said, "Sons of Ariston, a godlike race is born of an illustrious man." And that's where I'm going to wrap it up because of time. People don't like it when you go over an hour, and one of the alternatives doesn't like it either. So this is the case for laying out what exactly is justice. We will see what the arguments are when we pick up in the next section. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat complicated topic. I know that I interjected some of my own stuff, but that is why we are here, to learn and to dispense wisdom as we go along. So anything that I speak of on my own, I hold as could be possibly wrong. Anything they say, I hold as could be possibly wrong. And so thereby, I seek wisdom. I do try to dispense it where I have found it in my best estimation. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You're perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.